Space Invaders, but Super, or just 91. Space Invaders, the first big computer game, came out in 1978 by Taito. Of course, many sequels: Space Invaders Part 2, Space Invaders 2, Return of the Invaders, and then we come to Super Space Invaders, or Super Space Invaders 1991, released in 1990. Arcade game, and it uses Taito's F1, F2 system hardware, and all the home versions are called Super Space Invaders, and came out on the Amiga, CPC, ST, C64, PC, which we can't play today because I got it on floppy disk and then the laptop just went wrong, so that's the end of that. And well, we go through all the versions that we're going to look at. And of course, Taito is still milking this franchise today for all it's worth as well. I'll go through the list here. Oh goodness, we released it in 2008. 2005, 2006, Space Invaders Extreme, Space Invaders Extreme 2, Space Invaders Infinity Gene. Money spinner for Taito, basically. What better place to start than the Commodore 64? Big Taito logo. And an intro. I found different versions of the game online loading into my C64. Some have longer intros than others, so I'm just going with this version. And you've got this lovely intro here with all this parallax scrolling going on. And you start the game, you've got to select which level you want to start off on because you take different routes through the game. Round 1.1, and we've got, our version has been cracked by, didn't see who that was, but press fire. And off we go. And you've got a good approximation of the arcade game here. And look at the lovely 50 frames a second movement. And the spinning pyramid across the top, which isn't authentic to level 1. As usual, the home versions are going to be slightly cut down or approximated from the arcade. It was an arcade game I ever saw, actually. And the feeling was, in some of the magazines at the time, it's like, Space Invaders, that's old hat, isn't it? And there's various power-ups available. This is the old kind of shields you could hide behind, except this time you can shoot them upwards. And Space Invaders, when they smash into them, they die. So you can put them into their path, and they will die. That's level 1 cleared. And there seems to be 3 waves on each level. And Space Invaders will do different things in each wave. Sometimes they drop down, sometimes they grow larger, sometimes you set off more aliens when you shoot them. And of course, you know, Space Invaders, it follows the basic rules, so when it reaches the bottom, you die. Except on this version, you have a shield as well. And the pyramid is, I think, a top of the level baddie from later in the game on the arcade, but on the C64, it's the only baddie you get at the top of the screen. And on this level, or the wave 3 here, the invaders get bigger as you shoot them before they eventually explode. Well, it can be quite hard, as with proper Space Invaders or original Space Invaders, to get that last baddie. And you get this level called Cattle Mutilation on the 16-bit and C64 version, where you have to stop the invaders stealing the cattle. And even when the spaceships take off with the cattle, you can still shoot them down. They drop the cattle back unless you shoot the cattle itself, or the cows themselves. Quite a nice little bonus level, and it shows you what score you've got on the right-hand side. Well, it shows you what score you get for shooting each spaceship, because you get more the further away it is. And this level seems to last for about 30 seconds as a bonus level. After a certain amount of levels, you'll get an end of level baddie as well, but not on the first level or the first set of waves. One curious thing about the C64 version as well is it has No music during the gameplay, just sound effects. Over to the Sinclair Spectrum. If I didn't mention it, the game's published on the home systems by Domark. And there is 2-player games as well on all of these versions. And it's basically 2 spaceships at the bottom at the same time. It gives you twice the firepower, so that can be quite fun. So monochromatic on the Specky, and doesn't move particularly quickly. And because of the monochromatic nature and having these slightly busy backgrounds, it's slightly difficult to see some of the baddies. Just gone over to CRT to show you, and you're relying on the outline of the baddies at all times. Also, at the moment, I must say, we've gone over from a grey +2 to a black +2A on the CRT shots, where we got slight glitching as well occasionally on the aliens. That is certainly not there on the grey +2. I'll see if I can show that to you when it goes past. There you go. See on the top line, they get these lines. They don't seem to be present on the grey +2. You do get the authentic spaceship at the top on the Spectrum though. No music again. Over to the Amstrad CPC. Nice loading screen. I say that so often with the CPC. Sometimes it's nice just to have all that colour. Music's the same as the Specky. Same coders as the Specky version as well. And it's been developed for the 8-bits by the Kremlin for Domark Limited. Not the Kremlin in Russia. The Kremlin were a coding team in the late 80s, early 90s. A little bit of loading. And now, I'm making a guess here, but these CPC graphics have the look of graphics that have been converted across from another system by automated means. They have that slightly messy look that you get when you do that, and you have to tidy it all up, but it never quite looks right. And it's all a bit too busy. I complained on the Spectrum version it's too difficult to see what's going on. Actually, on the CPC version, it can be difficult to see what's going on as well against the backgrounds or where your craft is. Even with all the CPC's colours, it all looks... It may not be, but to my eye, these have the look of graphics that have been converted very quickly from another version. Gameplay is pretty much identical to the Spectrum version. Speed is possibly very slightly slower. It's not your first stop for Space Invaders on the CPC, put it that way. And for a full price game, you're not going to be that impressed. Over to the Sega Master System, and my copy still has its price tag on it, $15.99. I'm sure it probably retailed for more than that originally, but my copy $15.99 from whatever shop it came from. The ticket is unmarked. You get all this text intro on the Master System version. Drags on a bit, so it's best just to press fire. And we go to a nice graphic here. Looks very similar to the CPC graphics. And indeed the coders and the people behind it are the same people who did the Spectrum and Amstrad versions. Z80 processor involved. There could be code sharing going on. And we might even have the answer to where those CPC converted graphics came from. Well, first indications are on the high score table there. It's using the hardware of the machine quite well. Let's start the game, and you get the map of all the levels there as per the 16-bit versions and the C64. Off we go. And the sprites are still fairly small, and I'm wondering if indeed those CPC sprites were copied across from the Master System, or at least on this version, whatever the original machine graphics came from, the Master System has better graphics. The sprites move smoothly. There's no tune. Sound effects are adequate. But it's all quite good, actually. I do recommend this game on the Master System and have done in previous Master System game roundups. And the waves seem to replicate the other versions in the arcade, and you do get the cattle mutilation round on the Master System as well. Off the 16 bits and starting off with the Atari ST with a very crunchy sampled soundtrack. And you get this little animation. All quite fun, and quite well done as well, actually. And both the ST and Amiga versions have this animation. The Amiga version has better sound, but the animation remains exactly the same. And now we'll be putting in another disc because we've used up all the space in those samples on disc 1. And if you download the cracked version of this, make sure you get the second cracked disc, as I didn't. And we've got sampled music. It's better quality than music we've heard before. It's very nice. And then we're back to AY sound, but hey ho. Taito. You don't see the Taito logo that often on all the 8 and 16-bit computers, do you? You might say Taito, but you very rarely get the actual logo. Soundtrack is far better than the Spectrum and Amstrad versions. Why this soundtrack couldn't be on those versions, I don't know, because we're past the sample bit, so no reason why it couldn't have been. Sounds a bit like Bomberman music, doesn't it? For some reason, it's only let me select Advanced Game. I don't know what the difference is, but you get all these where the man's making funny noises. Oh, we'll gloss over that. For some reason, you get the choice of normal and advanced games, and we're just going to do the advanced. And off we go. And there is no kicking soundtrack. This game is a game that needs a kicking soundtrack, and the ST version, and all the other versions on the home computers have it. So it makes it seem very Spartan for a game that actually looks quite polished. That said, comes back to the game being a bit old hat, really, doesn't it? In terms of, well, would you be buying this game as opposed to any other 16-bit game for the same price? If someone turned around to you and said this was a budget game, you'd go, yeah, or one of those kind of Team 17, not budget but not quite full price games. Yep, got a power up. Oh, and that's a shield bonus. Actually, no, that was enhanced weapons. The arcade version tells you what your power up is. On the home computer version, tough luck, you've got to probably try and guess what your power up is. Over to the Amiga. And I won't show you all that intro again, except to say the Amiga has lovely sampled audio. And this time it's going to let me play the normal game. So we select our zone. Now come on, the Amiga's going to have a kicking soundtrack. No. Why? This game needs... It needs that Super Stardust kicking soundtrack to really help drive it along, not just doing down, down, down. I know it's Space Invaders. It's Space Invaders updated. Super Stardust is asteroids updated. This is a good power-up. You get a butterfly that mows through the screen. It doesn't go left or right, just mows straight through the screen. This is a game that needs that it needs Team 17, bless them, to come along and say, this is what we need to do to update this game. And of course, the arcade game does have all this stuff. It's Domark cheaping out, basically. Back to the C64, and you get to the end of level 2, and you get this big baddie going around, and you get regular power-ups coming across where if you shoot the pyramid from the top of the screen that you're going to need with the shield. And there we go, and that takes forever to destroy that baddie. And you seem to get that every second wave or so. Second wave, second level, also big baddie. They generally move around in the same way, at least on the C64. And you get these lovely backgrounds as well, especially on the C64 and 16-bit versions. It's not the game isn't fun. It's just a bit like your granny's put on a miniskirt and has gone clubbing. It just has that feeling. And a lovely big baddie again at the end of the level here. Absolutely massive sprite of the kind the C64 can do really well. There are no end-of-level baddies on the Spectrum and CPC versions that I can see. I could be wrong, but I've played through those versions quite far. There are no evidence there's actually big baddies there that I can see on the Speccy and C64. How does this baddie live if you can separate like that? Over to the Speccy, and you do get these scrolling levels that you get from the arcade on the Speccy as well. Unfortunately, it's in red, and it makes it really, really hard to see. Now, you'll probably look at this on a modern monitor, and we're capturing RGB. Just think about looking at this on an RF connection, on a 48K Spectrum, on, you know, with all that blurring on a small screen, how this looks. And I think some of the reviewers did pick up on that at the time. It's ludicrous. I can't see, and if it just, yeah, tiny sprites in two colours. There's no clarity at all. You know how Lemmings on the Spectrum had two-colour graphics? It was really clear. Super Space Invaders is the opposite of that at times. Over the CPC with our tiny sprites that have been badly converted, jerking around, and it's really not any fun at all. It feels like a budget game. I know I said that on the 16-bit versions. This really feels like the kind of thing that Mastertronical players would put out. Odd enough, not Codemasters. I just think it's one of those, yeah, it just has that feel, really, of something cheap and cheerful and intended to amuse you for a few minutes. And the backgrounds in the CPC version are really ugly. And on this level, everything gets lost in the background. And there's no reason for that. CPC's got 27 colours, right? This should not be a problem at all. But the palette choices in the background are so astonishingly, ham-fistedly, idiotically bad. And then you get the power-ups on the screen there and everything just slows down to a crawl. And they couldn't be bothered, could they? This is a quick 2-week conversion by the coders of the Spectrum version to the CPC. They've been told, get some colour into it, don't do a straight Spectrum board. But they really couldn't be bothered. There's nothing about this that says they could be bothered at all. Let's move this on. Again, here's a level with horrible colours. I could be wrong here. Perhaps my disc image is corrupt. Who knows? But I just get the feeling it's not. I just get the feeling it was always like that. And on the CPC version, which I've now played all the way through, you don't complete the game. No, you just loop around again, back to level 1. I have to mention that the Master System version is much harder than the other 8-bit versions. It's because it's got a decent amount of speed on it, so when you get those last few aliens, they really come down at you fast. And when there's lots of sprites on the screen, there's no slowdown, which you sometimes get on Master System games, but no, here it works very well indeed. And because the game is much harder, you do have to utilise the little power-ups that come down from the spaceships at the top of the screen as well, because if you don't, you'll just be overwhelmed. And the Master System has the proper end-of-level baddies as well, unlike the Spectrum and Amstrad version with the big baddie here going around. But I'm not going to get much further because it's game over. Sadly, it is much harder than the 16-bits as well. This is the hardest version, in my opinion. And here's the cattle level on the ST. And it's just as much fun as it is on the C64 version. And going on to the later levels on the ST and Amiga, this is the Amiga version, and you get all these lovely, far more complicated levels with all these different movements and scrolling and different baddies. It's all rather wonderful, actually. It's slightly deceptive when you're early in the game that it looks very much like traditional Space Invaders, and they get all these different enemy patterns. And on the 16-bit versions as well, you get these big end-of-level baddies and big power-ups here on the Amiga. They're nothing particularly special, but by goodness me, after playing the Spectrum and Amstrad version, you're very grateful for this. And a little glimpse of two-player action here on the 16-bits. And you can see you double up the firepower. It works really well. I can see you having fun with a mate with this. The only thing is you're going to clear through the game pretty well. There are two end-of-level screens here, and we're on the Amiga. I haven't completed the game on the Amiga. This is what happens when you don't complete the game. And I have to say, has the artist never seen an actual human female before? Look at the lady on the right. What is going on with her head in relation to her body? Super Space Invaders. It's pretty much, as I said before, like your granny putting on a miniskirt and going out clubbing. And, well, in the arcade, it pulls it off. It has a shiny, wonderful feel, great sound, and it's a full update. Whether the kids of 1991 would have wanted to play it, I probably would have gone and played something new, to be honest. But it's still a pretty good game. Whether the Amiga, ST, Master System and C64, well, these are actually pretty solid ports of the arcade. They're not perfect by any means. There's things missing, there's certain shininess and feel of polish that you have in the arcade that these versions don't have. But they all play pretty well as long as you like Space Invaders. There's many, many better shoot-em-ups you can play if you don't. The elephant in the room, games like Xenon 2, which are scrolling shoot-em-ups, and all sorts of other games as well. Spectrum and CPC versions. Oh, dear me. Tiny sprites that move at an arthritic space that get mixed up in the background. No end-of-level baddies. The fact that certainly the CPC version wraps around. The fact the CPC version has some absolutely terrible palette choices and clearly automatically converted graphics from some other version that no one's really been bothered to sort out. Neither of these versions are worth playing at all. For my money, if you've got a 16-bit and you want this kind of game, I'm sorry, it's not Super Space Invaders. There's plenty of other games you can play, Xenon 2, and all sorts of different and interesting shoot-em-ups you can play. If you've got a Master System or a C64, however, oh my, I love this game on the Master System. It's so polished and so great and so overlooked and so cheap to buy as well. And on the C64, I was pleasantly surprised actually. It's actually a really good shoot-em-up for the 64. It's just about polished enough. It's a shame it doesn't have a kicking soundtrack to go with it. And hey, C64 hackers, can't you sort this one out? Because if you put a really good soundtrack on this game, it would be something truly special.